So we now have the ability to save to the database whenever we call process event with an event. We send an event to the space server and processes the event, and this will be persisted in the database and we can check it. But these are manually created, and what I want to do is create a new context to handle this new API. So maybe we can call it space command, and then define module bxr space command, and this can have the API we're hoping for. So we could say, so what events do we have? Start with some simple ones like create box. And this API so what are the things we need? Like we always need space and then these arguments. An ID for the box, name for the box, position, rotation, scaling. So the first argument can always be the space ID, and then you can have let's see, if it's coming from the front end, we probably want a map. Let me try to avoid a map first if I can. So we have an ID for the box, name of the box, and optional position, rotation, scaling. So if we just did this, we can assume default position, rotation, scaling, or maybe always force position, rotation, scaling. And what this would do is it would just process the event. And here we construct the event. So the event so process event also needs the space ID, which we don't have one that takes. So we take the PID of the slug. Let's look at the cast again. Safe handle cast. This creates the payload, and so if you look at this structure, we don't actually need the space ID in here. You could get away with just doing slug, and then you create box created. You can just do the XR events box created, and I can't actually see what things are in here. So I don't think we need the space ID. Remove this. We just need these. So then it is ID is the ID, name is the name, position is the position, rotation, scale. And then you pop this in to process the event with the slug. This is the event. So if we call this, it should also persist one event. We can make a test around this. Event test here. Send events to a destination. Test create event from command. The XR command space command create box. First we need to create a space, so let's start a space. And we'll create a space slug. The ID for this box will be a random UUID. So ecto UUID generate. Then the name will be box C. And we'll just grab some placeholders for this. Then we'll wait a tiny bit and check if there are stored events. Okay, very good. It stored it. So this is what's persisted in the database. ID inserted at payload. Okay, so this is the ID of the record here. Which is different from the entity. Okay, this is the... I don't even think we need a primary ID. We can maybe get by with just the sequence. They're never going to do a search by ID. Sequence of 1 for the space ID. Box created. And so if we were to send this message, we would also want to broadcast it. And the broadcasting currently happens in Space Channel. So when something happens, we actually go to this handler that's handling Spaces API, which calls the context, and the context does the broadcasting. And so if we want to do replays, we're not going to replay from the Space Channel, because the Space Channel is not generating the event. It's some other process that's going to read through the events and play them at their appropriate times. So instead of this handle in triggering the broadcasting from the existing space's context, I think it is the gen server's task, the space server's task to broadcast the happened event. So when we get this broadcaster sync notify, we're handling the event, and then it's sending it over to be stored. At the same time, do we broadcast each and everything that's coming through here? Maybe, but maybe not. Because you might want to batch them. For example, if everybody's moving, you might want to batch all the movements all together. The same with the creation of entities. Do you want to do each one? We'd start that way. If we started that way, let's do what's in the current space context. So we go to spaces, and let's see, when do we do a broadcast here? We broadcast like this. broadcast on the channel with a certain topic. So in the space server, we have a similar kind of function. Find broadcast. So we would need the space. Then we would need the broadcast. What do we call these terms? Given top message. Okay, so message and then payload. So that'll kind of look like this. Broadcast space. The message becomes this thing. And map from struct event. It's a little redundant. We can clean that up. Space does not exist. Oh yes. State space. So what would happen now is if we were to send an event, it would get persisted and it should broadcast something. So let's test this out. So imagine we have our server. Well, it's not going to create anything. Nobody's listening to this message on the front end, so nothing will happen. But let's maybe console log something out. So in order to see it on the front end, we would need space broker to subscribe to everything that we have incoming. Here. On message of everything, we say incoming emit blankety blank. But we can also console.log channel incoming is event and payload. So now we can Chrome. Okay. I don't expect anything will appear graphically, but I'm seeing channel incoming, blah, blah, blah. What I want to see next is here, if we use the xr space command and say create box for the slug at A, we're at A, right? Okay, and an ID of ecto UID generate, and the name is box box, and position, let's just do x 0, y 0, z 0, and I think the rest for these has to be the same. Let's see if I can successfully copy, paste, comma, paste. Alright, so if I enter that, it's inserted, and we have an incoming message. Box created. So this might be enough for us to do something with it in the front end. So then you would have to match something that looks like this. And then handle it. So if we made a message for this on incoming, it could be an event or signal hub incoming. So would the thing look like could it look like this? And this payload kind of looks like this. ID, name, position, rotation, scale. Yeah, so ID, the string, name, the string, position is a here it might actually be easier just to say a vector instead of x, y, and z. But whatever, position, rotation, scaling, we'll figure that out. And so could you listen to this in Scene Manager, where you are subscribed to some of these events, like signal hub dot incoming. So we're listening to member moved, component change, entity created. So we would have to create one for every type, right? Let's find or create mesh. Does it contain? Yeah, it contains components. Okay, so some API needs to change to handle these kind of events. Which I'm sure it'll work. So currently we need to rework this event into a different shape, because find or create mesh expects the type, name, parent, right, components, name, yeah. Yeah, when you create something, it doesn't automatically have a parent. So, and it doesn't have other components. So probably the way that it is, it will be a bit different. So find or create mesh just says this, and entity components. So let's see, mesh, entity type, box. I think I will have to do something like just this part, and then move it to just that part. So it's a bit of this and a bit of this. Let's see, our dot under, okay, so that mesh, this get mesh by ID will be event ID, and if you can't find the mesh, then we don't need to know it's a box because the event says box. If you can't find the mesh, then create the mesh. This will be event name, put in the scene, add the tag that it's teleportable, and that's it. That'll put it at the origin. Then you want to set the mesh dot position equal to copy from floats x, y, and z. Is there a different kind of copy? Copy from, and this is what? A kind of vector 3. So if we're getting it from the database, we'll just say position copy from floats. That can be position x, position y, position z. And this was const position, rotation, scaling, bit. Can you do as position like that? No, okay. And that should put something there. So there's no box at the origin right now. I don't even know if this grid is aligned with the origin. But if I go back to this command and modify the name of this box slightly, hey, there's a box. Clearly we have some organizational work to clean up here to transform everything into listening to events. But it's a start.